Do you think you know who's holding you back? You believe you can spot the obvious enemies, the people who clearly want to see you fail. But what if I told you that the real destroyers of greatness hide in plain sight? They're your friends, your family, even the people who claim they love you most. And while you're busy fighting the obvious battles, they're slowly poisoning the very thing that makes you extraordinary. Friedrich Nietzsche spent his life studying human nature, and he saw something terrifying. Most people don't just choose weakness, they actively work to make others weak too. In his masterwork, Beyond Good and Evil, he wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. But the tribe doesn't just want to overwhelm you, it wants to destroy what makes you great. Maybe you've never stopped to think about this. But think now. How many times have you had a big dream only to have someone bring you back to reality? How many times have you felt excited about becoming something more, only to have someone make you feel guilty for wanting it? How many times have you been around certain people and walked away feeling smaller, weaker, or less sure of yourself? This isn't an accident. These people are working against your greatness, driven by forces they don't understand. Forces that Nietzsche called the most dangerous enemies of human potential. And here's what's truly frightening. You probably trust these people. You might even love them. Because the greatest enemies of greatness don't announce themselves. They don't wear villain costumes or carry weapons. They use something much more powerful, your own emotions, against you. They are the shadows that whisper doubt, the invisible chains that bind your potential, the psychic erosion that happens so slowly you mistake it for wisdom. In this video, we'll expose the 5 types of people that Nietzsche would identify as the greatest threats to your potential. These aren't cartoon villains, they're people who seem normal, even caring. But they carry a poison that can kill your dreams before you even know what hit you. We'll use Nietzsche's own words and ideas to show you exactly how these people operate, but more than that, we'll give you the tools to recognize when you're under attack. Because once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Are you ready? Then take a deep breath and prepare yourself. But I'm warning you, after you hear this, you'll never look at the people around you the same way again. Imagine living with someone who blames you for everything they feel, who turns your presence into a trigger, who makes you responsible for emotions you never caused. At first, they seem fragile, sensitive, deep. But over time, you realize you're being dragged into a battlefield that isn't yours, and where you're already at a disadvantage. This is the victim maker, and they are one of the most dangerous people you'll ever meet. Not because they're evil, but because they're like a shadow creeping into your mind, coloring your thoughts without you noticing. They are masters of something Nietzsche called ressentiment. This is different from regular anger. Ressentiment is when someone's whole identity becomes about being wronged. They feed off feeling hurt, and they need someone to blame. They don't mean to harm you. They are prisoners of fears they barely understand themselves. But their prison becomes yours. Nietzsche wrote about this in On the Genealogy of Morals. He said, "What we do not confront in ourselves, we will encounter as fate. And often this fate has a name, a face, and shares the table with you." The victim maker is someone dominated by unresolved wounds, unprocessed emotional fragments. Instead of looking inward, they aim at you and turn you into a canvas for their internal conflicts. The victim maker doesn't just complain about what happened to them years ago. They make you responsible for fixing their feelings right now. When you succeed at something, they find a way to make it about their pain. When you're happy, they remind you of their suffering. When you want to grow or change, they guilt you into staying the same so you can keep taking care of them. These people often position themselves as victims. Everything that happens is someone else's fault, never theirs. When they feel anger, it's because you provoked it. When they're sad, it's because you disappointed them. When they feel inferior, it's because you think you're superior. This distortion is so subtle that you start to question yourself. Was I really insensitive? Did I say something wrong? Am I toxic? And thus, manipulation occurs without a shout being heard, without a direct request being made. It's all emotional, unconscious, and absolutely effective. Worse still, these people are often charming. They have sensitivity, an aura of emotional intensity. This creates a trap, because you think you can help them, heal them, understand them better than others. But what you're doing, in practice, is sacrificing your psychic health trying to rescue someone who refuses to dive into themselves. Take a moment. Think about the people in your life who always seem to be suffering, who always need rescuing, who makes you feel guilty when you succeed. Can you feel how they drain something vital from you? That's not your imagination. That's your life force being consumed drop by drop until you barely recognize yourself. Who in your world wears the mask of victim but holds the knife of guilt? How many times have you walked away from them feeling empty, wondering why their pain has somehow become yours to carry? The only way to protect yourself from a victim maker is to develop awareness, recognize the patterns, and constantly ask yourself if what you're feeling is yours or has been induced. Because the victim maker doesn't invade your life violently. They enter through the gap of your empathy. Your spirit was meant to soar, not sink under someone else's wounds. But the victim maker isn't the only one who uses your goodness against you. There's another type that's even more common, one who doesn't attack your energy but something far more precious, your courage to be different. If this makes sense to you, subscribe and stay with us. The more light we shed on these hidden patterns, the less power they have over you. Picture this. You have an idea that excites you, something different, something bold, something that could change your life. You start to share it with someone you trust, and immediately you see their face change. They get uncomfortable. They start asking questions like, "Are you sure about this?" and "What will people think?" and "Maybe you should be more realistic." This person isn't trying to hurt you. They genuinely think they're helping, but what they're really doing is trying to pull you back into the crowd, like invisible hands reaching out from the masses to drag you down. This is the crowd follower, and they are one of the biggest killers of human potential. They don't understand that their fear has become a contagion, spreading through their words, their worried looks, their practical advice. Nietzsche wrote extensively about what he called herd mentality. In The Gay Science, he said, "The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." The crowd follower can't stand the idea of someone breaking away from the pack, not because they're jealous, but because your independence threatens their entire worldview. If you can be different and succeed, what does that say about their choice to stay safe and ordinary? These people disguise their fear as wisdom. They'll tell you they're just being realistic, or looking out for you. They'll remind you of all the people who tried and failed. They'll point out all the risks and none of the possibilities. They're not giving you advice, they're giving you their limitations. The crowd follower operates on one basic principle: normal is safe, and safe is good. They've made peace with being average, and they need you to make that same peace. Because if you don't, if you actually go out there and become something extraordinary, it makes their ordinary life look like a choice instead of fate. Nietzsche called this the fear of standing out. Most people would rather be wrong with the majority than right by themselves. The crowd follower has internalized this fear so completely that they can't even imagine another way to live. You can recognize a crowd follower by how they react to your ambitions. They don't get excited for you. They get nervous. They don't ask, "How can I help?" They ask, "Are you sure?" They don't see possibilities. They see dangers. And slowly, their fear becomes your fear. The most insidious thing about crowd followers is that they often love you. They genuinely want you to be happy and safe, but they can't separate happiness from conformity or safety from mediocrity, so their love becomes a cage and their care becomes a chain. Pause for a moment and think, who in your life gets nervous when you dream big? Who asks, "Are you sure?" instead of, "How can I help?" You might find that some of these people are the ones closest to you, the ones whose approval you crave most. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You might catch glimpses of this crowd follower in yourself, in those moments when someone else's boldness makes you uncomfortable. The crowd follower's fear becomes a contagion, spreading through whispered warnings and worried glances. But your spirit was meant to stand apart, to shine with its own light. Don't let their need for sameness eclipse the star you were born to be. But there's something even more dangerous than someone who wants you to blend in. There's someone who wants you to believe that your very desire for greatness is a sin. There's a type of person who will look you in the eye and tell you that your strength is selfishness, your confidence is arrogance, and your ambition is greed. They'll make you feel guilty for wanting more, ashamed of your power, and wrong for believing in yourself. This is the weakness preacher, and they are absolutely deadly to anyone trying to build greatness. The weakness preacher has turned weakness into a religion. They worship at the altar of humility, sacrifice, and putting others first. But here's the dark truth they don't realize. They need you to be weak so they can feel strong. They need you to be small so they can feel big. They need you to fail so they can feel righteous. They don't mean to be cruel. They've simply made peace with powerlessness and convinced themselves it's virtue. Nietzsche spent years studying this pattern. In Beyond Good and Evil, he wrote about how certain people create moral systems that make weakness look noble and strength look evil. He called this slave morality, a set of values created by people who can't win, so they change the rules of the game. The weakness preacher is a master of slave morality. They'll tell you that wanting success is greedy, that believing in yourself is pride, that standing up for yourself is mean, that pursuing your dreams is selfish. They've created a world where being powerful is a sin, and being powerless is a virtue. These people are especially dangerous because they often sound wise and spiritual. They talk about selflessness, humility, and service to others. But watch what happens when you start to succeed, when you start to shine, when you start to become powerful. Suddenly they're uncomfortable. Suddenly you're changing. Suddenly you're not the person you used to be. That's because the person you used to be was weak enough to make them feel strong. The person you're becoming threatens everything they believe about how the world should work. The weakness preacher operates through guilt and shame. They make you feel bad for having advantages, for using your talents, for wanting more than what you have. They convince you that success is luck, that achievement is unfair, and that anyone who wins must have cheated somehow. Nietzsche called this the resentment of the weak against the strong. But it's worse than simple jealousy. The weakness preacher has convinced themselves that weakness is morally superior to strength. So when they tear you down, they think they're doing God's work. You can spot a weakness preacher by how they react to your victories. They don't celebrate with you, they find reasons why your success doesn't count. They don't encourage your growth, they remind you to stay humble. They don't want you to become powerful, they want you to feel guilty for the power you already have. Stop and consider. Who makes you feel guilty for your successes? Who reminds you to stay humble when you should be celebrating? Who speaks of selflessness but somehow always needs you to sacrifice? You might discover that recognizing these forces in others calls you to face the parts of yourself that may unconsciously echo these patterns. Who in your life dims your light under the guise of kindness? How often have you felt smaller without knowing why? The answers may be more painful than you expect. Your strength was never meant to apologize for itself. Your greatness was never meant to bow to others' limitations. You need to rise above the voices that whisper you should be less. But even the weakness preacher pales in comparison to the next destroyer we must face. Someone who doesn't just want you to be weak, they want you to believe that strength is impossible. Imagine you're excited about something. You've got a vision, a goal, something that makes your heart race just thinking about it. You share it with someone you trust, and they immediately start explaining why it won't work. Not in a helpful way, in a crushing way. They don't just point out obstacles, they make the obstacles seem impossible. They don't just mention risks, they make the risks seem inevitable. This is the dream killer, and they are perhaps the most toxic person you can have in your life. They move through the world like emotional assassins, killing possibilities with surgical precision. The dream killer specializes in one thing, making the impossible seem obvious. They're not just pessimistic, they're convinced that anyone who dreams big is delusional. They've given up on their own potential so completely that they can't stand to see anyone else believe in theirs. Their surrender has become so total that your hope feels like a personal attack on their worldview. Nietzsche understood this type perfectly. He wrote about people who have what he called the will to nothingness, people who don't just lack ambition, but actively work against ambition in others. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he said, "The worst enemy you can meet will always be yourself. You lie in wait for yourself in caverns and forests. But sometimes that enemy lives outside of you, in the form of people who have become so comfortable with failure that success seems like a personal attack." The dream killer operates through a simple but devastating strategy. They make your dreams seem ridiculous. They don't argue with your goals directly, that would be too obvious. Instead, they ask questions designed to plant doubt. How many people actually succeed at that? Don't you think you're being unrealistic? What's your backup plan for when this doesn't work out? Notice how these questions aren't really questions, they're statements. The dream killer has already decided that you're going to fail. They're just trying to get you to agree with them. These people are especially dangerous because they often have experience. They might have tried something similar and failed, or they might know someone who did. They use their knowledge of failure to predict your future as if one person's loss guarantees everyone else's. But here's what the dream killer doesn't understand. Nietzsche believed that the will to power, the drive to grow, achieve, and become more, is the fundamental force of life. When you kill someone's dreams, you're not just taking away their goals, you're attacking their life force itself. The dream killer has usually been broken by their own failures. Instead of learning from them and trying again, they've turned their pain into a weapon against anyone who still has hope. They can't stand to see other people believe in possibilities because those possibilities remind them of what they gave up on. But here's what you must understand. They are not wise guides warning you of real dangers. They are broken souls projecting their wounds onto your future. Their predictions are not prophecies. They are confessions of their own defeat. You can recognize a dream killer by how they make you feel after you talk to them about your goals. You walk away feeling deflated, confused, like maybe you were being stupid for wanting something more. They have a gift for taking the wind out of your sails without seeming mean or hostile. Think carefully. Who in your life responds to your dreams with statistics of failure rather than strategies for success? Whose presence makes your goals feel foolish instead of inspiring? And perhaps more importantly, when have you been the dream killer in someone else's story? The most insidious thing about dream killers is that they often think they're being helpful. They believe they're saving you from disappointment, protecting you from failure, helping you be realistic. But what they're really doing is trying to make you as small as they've become. Your dreams were not meant to die in someone else's graveyard of surrender. Every great achievement began as someone's impossible dream. Don't let their limitations become your reality. But there's one final destroyer we must unveil, someone who doesn't kill your dreams violently. They suffocate them gently with the pillow of comfort. There's someone in your life who always has the same advice. Play it safe. When you want to take a risk, they remind you of your security. When you want to grow, they remind you of what you might lose. When you want to become more, they remind you of how good you already have it. This is the comfort pusher, and they are the final enemy of greatness we need to discuss. They operate like a psychological sedative, slowly numbing your drive for more. The comfort pusher isn't mean or obvious about their destruction. They seem caring, protective, wise. They genuinely want you to be happy and secure. But they've confused security with stagnation and comfort with death. They don't realize that in trying to keep you safe, they're slowly suffocating your soul. Nietzsche wrote about this extensively. He believed that comfort was one of the greatest enemies of human potential. In The Will to Power, he said, "What does not destroy me makes me stronger." But the comfort pusher wants to make sure nothing ever threatens to destroy you, which means nothing ever makes you stronger. These people operate through fear disguised as love. They'll remind you of all the things that could go wrong if you take a risk. They'll point out how comfortable your current situation is. They'll ask you why you want to mess with a good thing. They make staying the same seem like wisdom, and changing seem like madness. The comfort pusher has usually achieved a level of security that they're terrified of losing. They've worked hard to build a safe, predictable life, and they can't understand why anyone would voluntarily leave the safe zone. To them, comfort is the goal of life, not just a temporary rest stop. But Nietzsche understood something that the comfort pusher doesn't. Growth requires discomfort. Strength comes from struggle. greatness emerges from taking risks that comfort seekers would never take. The most dangerous thing about comfort pushers is that they often genuinely love you. They're not trying to hurt you, they're trying to protect you. But their protection becomes a prison, and their love becomes a leash that keeps you from running toward your destiny. You can recognize a comfort pusher by how they react when you want to make a change. They don't get excited for your growth. They get worried about your security. They don't see opportunity. They see danger. They don't encourage you to become more. They encourage you to appreciate what you already have. Ask yourself, who in your life always counsels caution when you feel called to leap? Who reminds you of your comfort when your soul is crying out for challenge? Their voices may be the very chains that keep you from breaking free. When have you been the comfort pusher in your own life? When have you chosen the safe path and then convinced yourself it was wisdom rather than fear? The comfort pusher represents what Nietzsche called the last man, someone who has given up on becoming anything greater in exchange for being safe and comfortable. They've stopped evolving, and they want you to stop too. They are the guardians of the cage, convincing you that freedom is too dangerous to desire. But your soul was made to soar, not to be tethered by comfort's golden chains. Your greatest self waits beyond the walls of what feels safe. The life you were meant to live breathes in the space between security and possibility. Now that you've walked through this gallery of greatness destroyers, you might be feeling a mixture of recognition and unease. You might be realizing that some of these people are in your life right now, their invisible influence shaping your choices. You might even be confronting the uncomfortable truth that fragments of these destroyers live within you too, whispering their limitations in moments of doubt. But here's what Nietzsche would tell you. Awareness is the first step to freedom. Recognition is the beginning of liberation. Seeing the cage is the first movement toward breaking it. Once you can see these patterns, you can start to break free from them. You can stop letting other people's fears become the boundaries of your world. You can stop accepting other people's weakness as the ceiling of your potential. You can stop letting other people's comfort zones become the prison of your soul. Nietzsche believed that most people live their entire lives without ever becoming who they truly are. They let others define them, limit them, shape them into something smaller than their potential. But you don't have to be most people. The path to greatness is treacherous. It demands everything you thought you were and calls you to become what you never imagined possible. There will always be voices trying to pull you back to the familiar territory of mediocrity. But as Nietzsche said, what does not destroy me makes me stronger. Every attempt to diminish you can become fuel for your ascension if you choose to see it that way. Your greatness is not a gift to be given, it's a territory to be conquered. And the first battle is recognizing the enemies that wear the masks of friends, the ones who love you enough to keep you small, the ones who care enough to clip your wings. This is your awakening moment. The moment you step out from the shadows cast by others' limitations and into the blazing light of your own potential. The moment you stop being the victim of other people's unconscious fears and become the author of your own magnificent story. Now, I want you to participate. Leave in the comments. Which of these 5 types of people is currently in your life, and how are you going to handle them differently now that you know what they're really doing? Your comment could be the wake-up call that someone else needs to hear. And remember, the people who try to keep you small are usually the ones who have given up on their own potential. Don't let their surrender become your defeat.